All right, so the Lusitania incident, and then all these quarrels over neutral commerce, start to contribute to this demand in the United States for a stronger army and navy. And so you start to see these champions of preparedness start to take some steps here to pressure the administration to do more as far as developing plans for military expansion. So in December of 1914, the National Security League was organized by these advocates of preparedness to promote their cause. And after the Lusitania sinking in 1915, Wilson is going to ask the War and Navy departments to develop plans for military expansion. This is going to touch on a whole nother debate between, isolationists, pacifists, who claim that this military buildup, this defense buildup, is just a program of jingos or for jingos and war traffickers. But regardless, we will see the United States take some steps to expand the Army and the Navy. For instance, the National Defense Act of 1916 is going to expand the regular federal army from about 90,000 to 175,000. And permitted the gradual enlargement to 223,000. It also increases the National Guard to about 440,000. So all this stuff is being done, and if the United States was to engage in World War I, it might last 4 months or so at the current rate of these casualty numbers before it's completely depleted of all its manpower. So even though we are taking steps to enlarge our military forces, it's still nowhere near the amount that's needed to be able to fight this war efficiently. And so, as we are seeing the United States taking steps to become closer to entering the war, over there in Europe, as we start to see tensions between the United States and Germany, on the rise, we do have a presidential election that we still have to take care of. So, the 1916 election was approaching, and the Republicans were hoping to regain their control of the normal elected majority. As you recall, in 1912, that Republican Party was split between Taft and Roosevelt, and the Republican Party is hoping that they could combine forces again and be able to oust out Woodrow Wilson. But unfortunately, the Republican Party didn't have a good answer, or as far as a candidate goes, that could really give a message that is too different from the one that Wilson was given. The Republicans are going to run the Supreme Court Justice Charles Evans Hughes. And Charles Evans Hughes and Wilson were pretty similar as far as candidates go. Both were sons of preachers. Both were attorneys. Both were former professors. Both had been progressive governors. Both were known for their integrity. However, Wilson has one thing that he can, one issue that he can use that will gain him that slight edge and ultimately allow him to win the election. He is a better campaigner, and he has two pledges that he will use in this election. One, his progressive social agenda, and number two, he kept us out of war. That pledge proved to be, or that slogan, "He kept us out of war," is going to resonate with enough American voters to give him a slight edge in the election. He wins by about 500,000 votes in the popular count, and he wins by roughly 23 votes in the Electoral College. Despite this victory, though, the closeness of the election did not bode well for the Democrats. We'll see this, the Republicans take majority during the midterm elections of 1918, and then that is going to cause Wilson some problems when he comes back from Paris and trying to get the Treaty of Versailles ratified. So we do want to remember the fact that the Republicans, while they're not winning the presidency, they are gaining ground as far as popularity goes among American voters. And so these last efforts for peace, before we get into the war, immediately after the election, Wilson again offered to mediate an end to the war in Europe. Wilson has this plan of a peace without victory. Wilson has this plan. He's on a crusade for international peace, but neither side is willing to abandon its major war aims. Wilson makes one more appeal for peace in the hope that public opinion will force the hands of the warring governments. And this is on January 22nd, 1917, when he makes his peace without victory speech, where he asserted the right of the United States to propose a lasting peace settlement, where you have a peace among equals. Although a peace without victory, a peace among equals, no side in this conflict is going to gain the upper hand as a result of these peace negotiations, and no side will be utterly destroyed and embarrassed. That's what he means by this peace without victory. Unfortunately, though, he was already too late. Exactly 2 weeks before he spoke, German military leaders had decided to wage unrestricted submarine warfare on Allied shipping. Now, they know that this is going to bring in the United States. They know that this is going to arouse American anger. But they're hoping that by resuming unrestricted submarine warfare, that they could score a quick knockout on the battlefields of Europe before the United States troops could actually enter the war and have an impact on the battlefield. And so on January 31st, this new policy was announced, effective on February 1st of 1917. All vessels would be sunk without warning. Freedom of the seas would now be enjoyed only by icebergs and fish. How does the United States respond? The Germans have now been defiant in the Sussex pledge that they made with the Americans 2 years prior. On February 3rd, Wilson told a joint session of Congress that the United States had broken diplomatic relations with the German government. That is the step that most nations take right before they go to war. 3 weeks later, he starts to arm U.S. merchant ships. Then, world events take another unexpected turn. On February 25th, Wilson learned that the British had intercepted an important message from the German Foreign Minister, Arthur Zimmermann. This message is known as the Zimmermann Note. This is going to be the last straw for the Americans in their attempt to stay out of this war. Arthur Zimmermann has sent a telegram to the Mexican government, and this Zimmermann Note had urged the Mexicans to invade the United States. Remember, at this time, Wilson had sent General John Pershing into Mexico as part of those Pancho Villa raids in northern Mexico to try to find Pancho Villa and hold him accountable for killing those Americans. And remember how I talked about in the previous videos that Mexican-American relations had been, really tense at this time. Well, the Germans had hoped to benefit from this circumstance. And so the note had urged the Mexicans to invade the United States, and in exchange for their making war in America, Germany guaranteed that Mexico would recover its lost territories in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. On March 1st, the news of the Zimmermann telegram broke out into the American press, and the American public goes wild with anger. All right, now, a country that had been, on the fence of neutrality, not really, but on the fence of neutrality, is now decidedly for the Allies. Another event happens in March of 1917. A revolution overthrew Russia's Tsarist government and established a provisional government of the Russian Republic. The fall of the Tsarist autocracy gave Americans the illusion that all the major Allied powers were now fighting for constitutional democracy. Now Woodrow Wilson, when he asked Congress to recognize that a state of war has occurred between Germany and the United States, he can make this statement, and the American public believes this, when America will be fighting this war to make the world safe for democracy. In reality, when Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks take power in November of 1917, they establish a communist dictatorship. However, the American public, when the Tsar is removed, they believe that now they can fight on the side of democracy. March 1917, German submarines sank 5 U.S. merchant ships in the North Atlantic. That's the last straw for Woodrow Wilson. April 2nd, he asked Congress to recognize that Germany and the United States were at war. And in his message to Congress, Wilson transformed the war in Europe from being a conventional struggle for power, to a righteous conflict. This is going to showcase Wilson's idealism, that this is a righteous conflict between democratic ideas and autocratic tyranny. America's effort to maintain a principled neutrality had become in Wilson's mind an unprecedented great crusade to end wars forever. This will be the war to end all wars. This will be America's effort to make the world safe for democracy. How does America, and let's go back and reflect for a second. How does America get to this point? The most prominent causes for America's entrance into the war were, number one, the Great Britain's propaganda campaign in the United States. The British had pretty much controlled the news wires going from Europe to America. So they were the ones that kind of controlled the information that Americans were getting about what was happening in Europe. And so therefore the news was decidedly biased against the Germans. And so this would help out that anti-German sentiment that most Americans were feeling. Number two, the United States, or America's deep involvement in the trade with the Allies. Munition makers, Allied bankers, proponents of war thought an Allied defeat and German domination of Europe would threaten the insurance of loans being paid back to the United States. The number one reason for why the United States went to war: unrestricted submarine warfare. All those other factors, would have not been decisive without the issue of Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare on the Atlantic. Once Wilson had taken a principled stand for the traditional rights of neutral nations and non-combatants on the high seas, he was to some extent at the mercy of ill-considered decisions by German military leadership. And so now he's at the mercy of, if the Germans decide to resume unrestricted submarine warfare, he is left with no choice, but to fight for the right of the freedom of the seas, America's freedom to trade with countries at war and have that protected neutrality. Wilson also has a plan. He has already outlined a plan to make sure that this is a war to end all wars. And this will be his 14 points. Wilson's 14 points is his plan, and it's Wilsonian idealism at its finest. It's his plan to ensure a long and lasting peace among the countries of the world. And it's going to rest on the principle of self-determination. And it's going to rest on the idea of collective security in the form of the League of Nations, where now you have an arena, you have a forum in which countries and the international community can come together, can air out grievances, and can come to an agreement. On what actions to take, so we can ensure that the carnage and destruction that has been experienced from 1914 to 1918 will no longer happen again in the civilized world. We will look at Wilson's 14 points, and we will look at what happens to his 14 points post-World War I. Now that we're involved in the war, we have to get support for the war. We have to change America we have to make that transition from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, from a country at peace to a country at war. How are we going to do this? What obstacles have to be overcome? What steps will the Wilson administration take? To be continued.